Hey everyone, welcome back to Elfbait. That's me on the channel. It's Sunday, which means it's stream time. I've got with me Saxius and Bear. We're going to be talking about today the voice in gaming, and not authorial voice, but more so the intended theme, tone, genre specifics of games, and what can happen if you stick to those, and the dangers of maybe venturing away from those. It's just going to look at maybe something maybe you haven't considered when it comes to games before. I mean, there's plenty of games out there that are perfectly generic, and they will do whatever you need them to do, and that's their design. They may even have a very vague, thin theme. I'll say D&D is this. D&D, in its basest form, is very generic fantasy that will do whatever you want. That said, D&D can have its dials turned and twisted, and certainly campaigns in D&D speak to certain styles of play, modes of play, and give it a more particular voice. Then there are games that have very specific voices to the point that it's almost to a detriment. Blade Runner. And then there are games that are somewhere in between, I will say, and we'll say like Star Wars is a good example of that. I would say that Alien is probably a good example of that. But yeah, so anyways, Saxius, when you think of voice in games, the voice of a game, what comes to your mind?
The intent of the designers for what the game is meant to achieve. There's a tone that the creators wanted to go for. There was an atmosphere that they wanted to achieve, and that's when I'm being asked what the tone or what the intent of the game is. That is the easiest one to point at. Call of Cthulhu. It's going to be horror. It's going to be a mixture of variations of the genres of horror, but you all know that you're going in for this because there's going to be mystery, and there's probably going to be something that will scare you, or at least your characters.
We'll dive into some of the specifics in a bit. I just want to kind of get your general feel on that. Bear, what about you? When we talk about the voice of a game.
Well, I think it's what Saxius said certainly tracks. At the same time, though, there's a certain level of pretension that you'll also find in the voice of a game, and that's sort of where I don't like things, is this idea that it's going to be, this is how the game is played, and this is the way the game should be, and everyone who doesn't do it this way is wrong. And as a result of that, sometimes the voice of a game, which is just meant to say this is the game we presented, can be used as a weapon against people because you're doing it wrong. Well, the voice of the game is communication from the writers, producers to you. What you do with it is your choice.
Yeah. So I think that's a good jumping off point. And also, like, going back to what Saxius was talking about with Call of Cthulhu, I think, and what got me thinking about this today is some conversations we've had previously, especially when we were talking about science fiction and stuff, for example. I'll share an experience of mine to kind of set this off. I feel like if you are playing a game that has a specific voice to it, and again, voice being tone, theme, style, whatever you want to call it, just kind of combining it under that term voice. If you don't play within that, then it ends up being kind of samey. In addition, you can really have a revolt on your hands from your players, as if you're the GM running it, for example. And I'm going to go back to like Star Wars, for example. I mentioned that Star Wars, like every campaign I have played in Star Wars, has almost always ended up just being basically Traveler with lightsabers, or Traveler with droids, Travelers with bounty hunters, because every group I've ever played with never had they never really played Star Wars in its themes and its tone and its main key points. It was always just this generic hodgepodge of characters doing whatever the hell they wanted in the Star Wars universe. And similar to Call of Cthulhu, yes, it is horror, and you can play any kind of horror in it. But I also feel like that people coming into it have a certain expectation of a style of horror. Yes, Chaosium did produce the Blood Brothers products, which are a kind of a tongue-in-cheek series of books back in the day that they did that are classic horror tropes brought into the Call of Cthulhu system, so slasher films and Frankenstein and stuff like that. But I think if you just have, like, for example, Jason Voorhees running around after a bunch of investigators and it doesn't tie in somewhere else, and that becomes more the meat of your campaign in Call of Cthulhu, you're going to lose the interest of a lot of players who came there to play Call of Cthulhu. You know, if you wanted to play a more generic horror game, there are generic horror games that you could be playing. And I'm not saying you can't do that. And again, this is not to tell people how to play their games, just food for thought as far as like things that might come up if you ignore the voice of your game. So that said, I mean, have any of you ever had experiences where you sat down to play a game and it was, you know, you were presented with this particular game and then it ended up being something way different? Because I think the voice can also be inserted into the game by the GM who's laying out the campaign. In a more generic game, you might still go, "Hey, we're all going to be playing Heroes of the Realm, and our campaign is about doing the thing." And then you have that player who then when you start playing, it doesn't go that way. I think it's also kind of abandoning that voice. Have you ever either run into that?
I'd say that I've been in a campaign where it was set up to be it was advertised as being a Band of Brothers sci-fi war campaign. I was quite interested in that. Came in, invited some of my friends along. We all, passed the tests. We got invited in. We were accepted as players. And then when we got into it, it quickly devolved into we are here for witnessing the DM's script and cinema. And we came thinking we were going to be thrown into meat grinders. We were going to have to experience all of this. And instead we were presented by all of these like events that were taking place off screen without our characters. And then we would then be, I don't know what the real intent was beyond that. I thought maybe we were then sent out to do things, but we couldn't really sort of interact or like develop our own stories as these events progressed. That was an event where the tone was sold as one thing and what we got was something completely different.
Yeah, fair. I mean, that would be annoying if you. That sounds like in that case the DM set the expectation, not the game itself, which is also a good point.
To be exact, it was using Warhammer 40,000, only war. The game is set for you to be in a grueling situation. You are playing expendable human soldiers. You can build up the expectation of what kind of a war front do you want to do with. So you're from the very get-go, you're coming in, you're playing a combat-heavy system, and it is going to be revolving the different aspects of warfare. And then you, the players, build up on like what you want to go out and experience. But then it got derailed because the DM wanted to then have his cinematic moments and political intrigue where our characters weren't involved.
I imagine if you came in to play a 40K game where you were going to be driving the action and then the DM took over and just sort of drove the action for you would be frustrating for sure. Yeah. Bear, what about you? Never play any games?
No.
Sure you don't play.
I'm very, very, yeah, exactly. I'm very, very picky about who I play with.
Let's flip it around.
The only story I can relate to is I was invited to play in a 2E D&D game one time, and I will flip it around in a minute. I know what you're going for. I agree. Where we were invited to play D&D, so I took all this time making this character. It was supposed to be a high fantasy campaign. I made an elf. I grabbed my Silmarillion. I went to the elf lexicon in the back. I put together his name using all the elf worlds. I showed up, and there was me, a girl, and these three other guys, and as the characters were introducing, it was kill, stab, thrust, fuck, murder, lots, and Biff, big dick. And then they got to me, and I'm like, Bob, Bob the Elf, because I came to play a real D&D game. They came to be murder, hobo, kill everythings. And as a result, myself and the girl were having a cigarette just talking like, what the fuck is this? And both of us were like, this isn't what we signed up for. What's more frustrating for me is when I set out the tone of a game. I tell you the voice of the game we're going to be playing. I tell you what it's supposed to be about. And the players just show up and do Comedy Central. And they think that's way cooler. Fucking annoys the living shit out of me.
Yeah.
I don't know what it is with our fucking hobby that attracts amateur comedians, most of whom aren't very good, but holy fuck, I'm sick of it.
Yeah.
If I'm running a serious game, show up and play a serious character.
Yeah, we're not even talking about the unironic comedy where they actually think they had a good idea, but that it ends up being hilarious. We're talking about the people who literally set out to just be, laughing at the table or think they can be. It's like, actually, it's funny not to, I'm definitely not an additionalist, but there's definitely a tone in modern gaming that a lot of people are really just crazy with it. At least the stuff that you see people playing online. I mean, I don't know. I mean, the general tables out there may be much different, but seems like a lot of people nowadays are just, I mean, granted, they're having fun, so I can't complain. And if everybody at the table is down for it, cool. But what you're talking about, that drives me nuts when you set out a game and you have a real cool idea in mind, and everybody or a good chunk of people. This happened with my dwarf campaign. I think I mentioned it before. I had this whole all dwarf campaign where the dwarves are going to try to basically save this dwarf hold. And so all the players were cool. They all made dwarf characters. That's awesome. But as we started playing, it was clear that some people showed up to make joke characters, and you can play through that a little bit. I mean, obviously, I'm not against some comedic relief, or a little bit of a shtick to your character. But yeah, when it becomes more shtick than character, then it's a problem.
Seriously.
Definitely. But it's also, I mean, I'm specifically thinking for when I am the DM, and when I took my real life group and I said, right, we're going to be playing D&D. Most of you haven't done serious gaming. Some of you have done 4 months. One of you have done several years. We're going to take a story heavy game with atmosphere, with a dedicated start, middle, and end, so that we have a goal. But it's going to be set in Ravenloft. Now, none of you know what Ravenloft is, but it's going to be gothic horror. It's going to have vampires. It's going to have morally grey situations. So right there, I was laying out the expectations. I then went out of my way to then reinforce it by describing it, and by also turning around to the players and saying, right, when they were getting a bit goofy and it was not meant to be goofy, I'll be cracking down and saying like, no, this is not the time for it. And I look them dead in the eyes and go, this is not it. You're breaking my immersion. You do not want to break my immersion.
Yeah, I mean, if you're the DM and you're trying to run the game and you can't get into it, then the entire game is going to suffer. Because ultimately, your job as the GM is to maintain the momentum of the campaign, to set the world. And if you're dreading running the game, then nobody is having fun.
Exactly.
Well, I also like the implied threat of, and you don't want to break my immersion. Like, that was a Save versus Saxius statement if I ever heard
Don't break my immersion. You wouldn't like me when my immersion is broken.
Well, yeah, because I've done this to one of the players from this real life group where they were going into right now Doom. They were going to an area that's meant to be like spooky. It's not horror level, but it's meant to be you are entering into high level stuff, outside of where you are supposed to be. And one of them was just going like, I do this. Like they were joking, and I just went, okay, you joked about this, now do this. Like you are now doing damage to your peer. And he was like, no, I was joking about. Well, look me in the eye. Do I look like I'm joking? No, you have broken my immersion. You're dicking around.
I've played tables where the DM is like, everything you say is
well, that's what I was doing in that moment. I came down. I was like, you said this. I'm keeping it to it. My immersion's broken, meaning everything you do now I'm holding you to it. I'm holding you so far to the coals, I am raking you alive. And the entire group went, oh, okay, like huddled together. This is it's more me that's intimidating them because I needed them to get out of that mentality. They were not in a place where I would allow this. They were meant to be serious about this. They were going to be meeting a powerful entity that could snap their fingers and kill their characters. And if they were going to be dicking around in a situations where diplomacy and role playing was going to be at the forefront, I was not going to be having them dicking around because then I'd be like, well, it looks like it is disintegration rays that's going to be flying around now, and I will not shed a tear because my immersion is broken.
So let's pick up from there real quick.
Just to build on that, that's why I established the rule in all my games. If you said it, your character said it.
Oh, definitely.
Unless you say, hey, out of character, blah, 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 blah. And if you do that too much, we're going to have a conversation about get your ass back into fucking character. But if you said it, your character said it. Let me tell you, all you need is 1 or 2 moments where the king or the cop or the priest or whoever goes, I'm sorry, what? And they go, and they get the message real fucking quick. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Oh, definitely. And it's needed. And I'm all for the players having, the moments where, they mess around, they do that, they let off the steam. That's fine. Like, I intentionally allow wide gaps for them to do that. And then there's going to be moments where I have prepared for this. This is my enjoyment. Because if I enjoy it, I know the players will enjoy it because I have been working towards building up for an event, for a tone, usually something that is in league with the game that we're running. And if the players decide that this is the time to do it, I'm not gonna tolerate it for long, and I crack down on it quickly so that everyone gets onto the same page.
Right. So real quick, that's the DM experiences aside. So I guess one thing to go with, what would you think are the benefits of playing a game that has a specific voice over, say, like a more generic game? I feel like Bear is kind of in this place too with his quest for his fantasy game that he wants to run, or even when you wrote, Heroic, for example. Heroic is written with a very specific voice, and so I think that clearly you see that there's a benefit to that because you wrote it into the game. But I think looking at other games that are out there, is there really any benefit to picking a game that has a specific voice over picking a more generic game and then just giving it a voice of your own? I mean, ultimately, you're always going to do that. We're not talking about not making the game your own, but playing the game. If you're playing a game that has a specific voice, you're playing in that setting, in that universe, and preserving as much of that as you can while you're still making it your own. What's really the main purpose or advantage there?
We were playing Call of Cthulhu one time in college, and my buddy Mike played it. And Mike does not like horror, but somehow they talked Mike into playing. Mike is one of those guys, I make characters for Mike in any game he plays in with me, because Mike making a character will slow the game down to a crawl, because Mike needs 2 hours. This is a guy who would take an hour to do his moves in Starfleet battles, his power allocations, right? He's a meticulous human being. The GM was getting so fucking frustrated. He finally said, look, just knock $40 off your money and take whatever you want from the equipment list so we can start playing. So Mike did. And then at some point, the Shoggoths appeared in the adventure. And Mike says, well, yeah, I light a stick of dynamite and I throw it down the Shoggoth's mouth. To which the GM was like, what? You mean dynamite? You don't have dynamite? He goes, yeah, I did. It's on my equipment list. It's right here. And he said, but no, but you, blah, 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 blah. And then it broke the mood so much that it degenerated the game into silliness all of a sudden. And then the GM reacted poorly, and suddenly we were fighting zombie soldiers and what have you. It was no longer Call of Cthulhu. The benefit of voice, and why I use voice for my writing and for my creations, is to tell you the way or style or mode or genre that you're trying to play or that I would like to see or what I'm designing this for. So, for example, with Heroic, people tell me about their campaigns they want to do with Heroic all the time. I'm not going to lie. 90% of them, I go, you wouldn't play that game. because it's all post Bronze Age,
Yeah, it's all
deconstructionist,
Yeah.
Iron Age, modern age superhero nonsense.
All
that I
the
don't
pouches and heavy black lining you can get.
or what have you, or we're going to be Suicide Squad, or we're going to be this, we're going to be. You know what? I also say, God bless you, have a good time, use whatever rules you want, because I'm not here to police your table. I've given you the suggestions of what I think should be done. I've given you the voice of what I think should be done, but at the end of the day, it's up to you to do what you want with the game. But you better tell your players in advance what you want. Because if you just say we're playing this game, they read it, show up, and you're doing something completely different, but you didn't bother to tell them, and they followed the voice of the game, they're going to feel like the outsiders. They're going to feel like the misfits. They're going to, and they won't enjoy
Oh,
themselves.
yeah, it's definitely a two-way street.
Oh, absolutely. It's definitely one of the things. Like, I'm going to take my heroic game. My real life group, they want to do the whole Suicide Squad, but that's because they know when I've gone through what the intent of heroic is for them. They know that this is not for them, but the characters I've shown them that you've made as villains appeals to them, so they want to use them. So we go down that route, and it's not what heroic was made for, but it facilitates it, which I like. The same way that D&D facilitates for me to do a Pirates of the Caribbean game. I can use both of them. It's not the intent of it, but I can use it.
Well, and this is my problem with generic role-playing games. They have no voice.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
GURPS bores the living tears out of me. It's like reading a textbook. It's devoid of flavor. It's devoid of taste. It's like eating a cracker, like a plain, unsalted, unmodified cracker. You know what I mean? There's no cheese, there's no jam, there's no meat, there's no nothing on it. It's just a cracker. That's not fun for me. Yes, I can use that engine to create worlds and blah, blah, blah. Now, mazel tov. But give me a game with a voice. Give me a game with a setting, which is something I miss. We used to have that in the 80s and 90s. Every game came with its own setting.
And it's important, I think, to say real quick that a voice doesn't have to be overly specific. It does not have to be super specific. I would say Cyberpunk 2020, 2013 has a very specific, it has a very strong voice, even though it's very much a generic cyberpunk world. But it is written with a heavy amount of style and and theme, to where you can still it still has a voice, even though that it's very open in what you can do with it. I would say good D&D campaign settings are also like that. Ravenloft is D&D, but it is D&D with a very distinct voice to it. I individual DM experiences aside, I think what kind of pulling back on this, where picking a game with a strong voice or a voice in general helps, is in establishing up front what the game should be like. So, I mean, all the gaming horror stories aside, if you invite your players to play Star Wars, that comes immediately, or should come immediately, with a bunch of stuff packed in with it. The same thing for when, like, you are playing, if you're playing heroic in the way that it's intended to be played. Obviously, people can play it however they wanted, but if you come to heroic, which is very much in its rules written to be that very heroic style. I mean, it is in the rules. I mean, you can it has it has allowances for playing outside that. Then that comes with certain information. If I'm inviting you to play in an Aliens campaign, yes, there's a lot of stuff that can happen in the Aliens universe, but you're going to be expecting dark, gritty, kind of claustrophobic, except for in very, unique circumstances, like when you get on those high-end corporate things. So a game with a voice should do a lot of the heavy lifting for the GM in terms of establishing setting, and also for the players in terms of characters to create, ideally. Sections.
Well, at least to my perspective, the way you find whether something has a tone or not, it is when you start looking at the book, the rules. You will find that there are aspects, aesthetics built in that helps reinforce it. using Ravenloft, they have gone through and said all of these spells, they now change how they look. You're the paladin summoning their holy mount rather than being, the shining, mount of, prime prestige. It's now this undead cadaver that comes out to present itself. I was like, oh, that's not good. Similarly, when you take something such as, cyberpunk, the rules, the law, the background of how, capitalism has like broken things down. That is then another aspect that reinforces the world that you are within, and that's where I often find the tones, and that's where the players will then also find that the tone of the game is sort of lending itself in, because it's baked within the very mechanics, or at the very least the very reading of the book itself. If that's making any sense.
It does. I mean, and that's where the voice of a game is a very positive thing, and how it should be really taken. I mean, a lot of people. I feel that there's a portion of gamers out there who aren't looking for a game voice, and there are plenty of games for that. I would say getting into a game that has a strong voice is probably not ideal if that's what you're looking. Don't join into a Game of Thrones themed RPG if you're not wanting to play, a Song of Ice and Fire style gaming. There is generic Dungeons and Dragons for you if you want generic Dungeons and Dragons. There's generic other games. Yeah.
And don't join a game of Paranoia if you want to do deep character role playing.
Yeah.
Or Toon.
Also, don't join games that absolutely just you're not capable of playing. Like, I won't play Paranoia. I've been invited to play Paranoia. I won't play it because I don't like that style of game. I can't play that style of game. It is lost on me because I'm not a jerk. So I don't like a game where the whole focus of the game is to be a jerk to somebody, to the other players.
Mr. and Mrs. America and all the ships at seas. This just in, Eli has said all people who play Paranoia, jerks.
No. The focus of the game is being a jerk.
Clip it now.
It's also slapstick, and I don't really like the slapstick element to it. It's just not what I like. And so I would not join a game of Paranoia, even if invited. I mean, yes, even if I know and love the people that are playing it. Let's say my regular gaming group's like, we're gonna play Paranoia. I'm like, I just can't.
No, it's the same with me. I don't like games that promotes player versus player. I've tried to get into it, and again, I'm going to use Warhammer for this. There's one where you play as the bad guys. There are rules for how to make them cooperate. There's rules for how to make them all work together. I've done 3 campaigns. Every single time, I have seen the groups deteriorate into who can be the biggest dick, who can screw over each other, and who can go the nuclear first. It's not fun. And I've lost friends because of this. So I'm not interested in any game that promotes a tone of that, where it is encouraging you to go player versus player or have any form of conflict within the party. Characters arguing and going back and forth, that's good role-playing. But if the system, or if it is a part of the game that you are wanting to trip up each other, then I am not the player, I am not the DM, and I will keep anything like that at a 10-foot distance from me, because I have no investment, because my experiences have been too negative for me to ever forgive such aspects or such tones.
Yeah, you definitely need to pay attention to the game you're playing and want to fit in with it. And I guess that is potentially one of the negatives for a game that has a strong voice, is that it really does put some demands and requirements on the players and the GM to really want to really buy into that. And to that end, I mean, I guess that also means that if you're going to run a game that has a strong voice, theme, tone, whatever, or play in one, you really do need to do your diligence and do the homework.
Yes.
If you're going to be playing in Star Wars and somehow you've missed everything that's happened in pop culture since 1970, whatever, you definitely maybe need to go watch a couple movies at least, and get a feel for it. I will say also, for example, like, if you're going to play, say, like, you're going to play Twilight 2000, right? And you're not really up on the military aspects of that game, right? Let's say you're not a soldier, you don't know, service folks at all. You're not a fan of war movies or whatever, so you don't have any frame of reference. Probably not the best game to get into. For that matter, I'm intimidated by playing Twilight 2000, for example, with actual service folks, because I haven't been there. Playing a game with them would just be fraught with a bunch of pitfalls for me as a person running it. That said, you can still find the place for your character in those settings where you maybe aren't the most confident. So let's say you're playing Twilight 2000 and you don't know jack about the military. Fine. Play the one civilian militiaman who falls in with the army guys, the Navy guys, whatever setting you're playing in. Not a lot of Navy play in Twilight 2000, except for maybe SEALs and stuff, corpsmen. But and play that from that point of view, where you don't have to know the military stuff. You can still pick your lane. Like if you're playing Star Wars and you're not a huge Star Wars person, maybe don't play the Jedi. Don't play the person who has a double helping of the setting. Because in addition to pew pew zoom zoom, you also have you got like mind powers and Jedis and stuff like that. Go ahead.
Star Trek.
Oh yeah.
If you're gonna play fucking Star Trek in a Star Trek campaign, for the love of Jesus and Mary, at least watch a little Star Trek.
Mm-hmm.
Like,
even if you're a huge fan of the show, play in that universe. I just had a bad experience. I've talked to you about this, where we did basically a first time playing of the Modifius ones. This is not a comment on the system, but in this game, the person playing the chief engineer was arguing against the engineering solution for the scenario. The person playing the, I think, navigator or helmsman that was on the away team mission was not only playing in a disruptive, joking way, but also with a very caricatured ethnic accent, which just took us right out. And here I am playing the highest ranked officer in the away team, besides the commander who's on the away team, and the security chief, going, this is what we need to do given what we know, and everybody's just arguing and bickering. That is not the Star Trek way. If you're in a away team, there's a chain of command. The engineer player should be looking for the engineering solution, because Starfleet doesn't put non-engineering minds in engineering. They have a process. Have you ever watched the show where the engineer's like, I think we should take some crystals out and put them on the floor and like make a mandala, on the ground.
And we'll get naked, paint our bodies in Klingon archaic burial ruins, and do a dance around the crystals. And that should fix the war,
is interpretive dance.
Yeah, no.
Yeah,
what you do is you point the phase capacitor at the interflux capacitor, and therefore you will create a biomimetic feed loop.
Yeah, I'll tell the story real quick. So we're on this away mission, and clearly there's some sort of medical issue that is causing a problem. None of us on the away team have the medical character or the science character. Clearly, we are not equipped to deal with this situation. Our shuttle is wrecked. There are parts on the planet that we could get to get the shuttle going. So my security chief is saying the tactical. I was the tactical officer, but I was also like the next ranking down from the Commodore, who was the ship's commander. And I'm like, we need to get the shuttle going. We need to collect the patients that are here and take them back to the ship where we have the facilities and the know-how to take care of the problem. Because none of us are doing it. And I got the engineer arguing with me over whether or not, no, we should stay here. I'm sure the solution we have to figuring this out is here on the planet. I'm like, I get that. And I kind of know where the player was going. He was trying to keep the action where the action is supposed to be, because clearly on the planet is where the adventure is, right? But that's not where the solution is coming from. That the gamer brain overrode the player brain. So, yeah, it was kind of a weird situation. But yeah, I mean, definitely play in the style of the setting that you've chosen to pick. You know. Yeah. There's some flexibility. Like if you're playing an Aliens campaign, we've seen through the Aliens movie, you can have loudmouthed, trash talking soldier characters who are maybe funny, and as long as they're not like obtusely like funny, like I've played in, we've all played in those games, I think, where you have the disruptive players like, haha, I'm gonna steal your sword while you're sleeping, or I'm going to empty all the magazines in your gun while you're, we don't do that. But, you can still be the wisecracking soldier. That's a real thing. So you're not out of place and out of theme doing that. Anyways, I think the voice of a game is very much a positive, strong thing that can be very beneficial when trying to pick the game, trying to get players into the game. However, if people playing the game miss on that mark, it is certainly going to show. Now, kind of any more comments on that last part before we go on?
No, I'm good.
All right,
makes sense.
So, negative aspects to playing games with a strong voice.
Have you ever been in a game where there's another player who comes in and they have, as I believe Bear said, the encyclopedic knowledge of not just the atmosphere, but the world, the tone, the inputs, the history. Yes. So, having that game, and I'm going to default back to the setting that I know I am kind of like that in Warhammer 40,000. It is, well, you have all of the opportunities to change things. It binds you. It limits you. You're going to have some problems with these players. Not because the players are a problem. No, far from it. It's just they have invested the time into this world. Sometimes more than the DM. And then it becomes a problem where if you're using established places, I'm going to use Forgotten Realms. You go to Baldur's Gate and you go, I want to go to the Weeping Elf or the Elf Song Tavern. Well, everyone knows what's in there. It's like they expect that, and if the DM hasn't read that chapter of the module, or have not gone in and read the Wikipedia to then know why the Elf Song Tavern is a very specific place, then that will suddenly ruin. Not ruined, but it will break the immersion that the player was looking for.
Yeah, fair.
Yeah. No, he. Nothing is more fucking obnoxious when you're a GM than the player that knows the setting better than you, and therefore they're no, Aragorn, fuck off. We're not playing the book. Leave me alone.
I will say, there is also always the worry, especially with less experienced GMs, that when you're running a game that has a strong voice, the GM may feel really hesitant in a lot of ways, and the players to a degree too. If they're less experienced in gaming in general, may feel hesitant in veering off too much from the central themes of that genre, that setting. As much as we're talking about, like, it's important to stick within the feel and of the setting. I would say there's a big difference between that and the specific action that goes on, and it's really a matter of wiggling back and forth along a center line, because that center line is going to be the voice. Clearly, you can go to either side of that and still stay on track. It's just if you go on to one side and just keep going, like I mentioned with the Star Wars games that always end up being like Firefly or Traveler in Star Wars, they pick a direction to veer off in, and they just go down that way, and then we never come back to the center line. You can do that with Alien. I would say if you ran an Alien campaign and they never ran into a xenomorph, a lot of your players would probably be disappointed because they came to the game expecting that. That said, you don't have to run the xenomorph all the time. There's plenty to do in that universe without it.
The way the Alien universe is presented by Free League in they're just the what they call the middle heavens. Absolutely, you could run a campaign that could last 10 years and never once run into a xenomorph.
Yeah, I mean, if you pick one colony, you could run a very cyberpunk style game there almost.
Or you could be bouncing around from planet to planet, space trucking, and still never run into a xenomorph.
Yeah,
I think the point is,
okay,
players need to understand that when they run into the xenomorph, they're going to die. The campaign is going to come to a horrible screeching end with most of you either your brains eaten out, your chests exploded, or acid burns that ate through your skull and destroyed you. Maybe one chick, the GM's girlfriend, will get to survive because she looks good in her panties when she gets into the fucking escape shuttle. Stop thinking this is the problem. Players' arrogant egos in those situations are, we would totally destroy the zombies. We would totally do the right thing. I wouldn't get caught in the zombie apocalypse because I'm smart. Well, you're not role-playing anymore, are you? You're not just trying to be you in the situation. Therefore, you're missing the point of the voice of the game, which is to be someone who is in this universe who has no fucking idea what a xenomorph is, doesn't know it has acid blood, and shits the bed when the thing shows up and starts killing everybody around them.
I think it's fair to that they're going to make an honest attempt to, and should they, by some chance, manage to bully for them, I got a dog who's complaining. I'll be right back. Talking about yourself. I gotta let this dude out. He's not gonna like it because it's thunderstorms here today, so he's not gonna.
I miss thunderstorms. Go ahead, man. Go ahead. Well, Saxius and I'll just talk heroic while you're gone. So anyway, Sax, this villainous week is upon us.
I am excited. I need to catch up with everything else. I haven't had a chance, but I'm excited.
I literally have already done the last villain, which is the big one. And I've done the first couple, and then later today I'm going to fill out the rest of the week with the other villains I've chosen. Yeah. But I'm really looking forward to the last villain reaction for you. I'm looking to see what you think of it all.
I will go out of my way because next week I'm not at work. I'm going to be at home, so I'll read every single one of them, and I'll give you direct feedback for what I want.
Everyone who wants to play heroic, if you've got a camera and a mic and you're able to commit to a once-a-month game on Saturday afternoons, Iman IQ is, I promised to run a game for him. Go onto my Discord. The instructions are there under Seeking, in the RPG section under Seeking Players. So far, I've had one application.
There's been a break in the rain, so I can leave him outside for a while because he was getting really restless because he spends most of his time in the yard. All right, so. Any other thoughts or comments that come up? I mean, I thought the main points really, why would you pick a game with a voice? I think we covered that. The advantages of a game with a strong voice. I think we covered that. The potential pitfalls. Have we covered all of those, or is there anything that we haven't really touched on?
I mean, there's a few pitfalls, like we've mentioned. I think trying to think.
I think we covered a lot of it.
Yeah, I mean, don't feel like you have to create more.
Yes,
we must create more. There must be more content to be pumped out here.
He's currently propagating CSV tables or CSV files in his head.
I know.
I think we even covered a little bit, like just how you can make sure that you're going to play a game with a voice well, and that's to do your research, do your homework. Make a decision, and this is I think the biggest one. Make a decision that you're going to have fun within the structure of that setting. Don't go there deciding that you're going to play X character that you have in your head, no matter what, and then fuck the rest of the the setting and the setup. Make sure your character works within the universe and talk to your players and the GM, because chances are, if you're not just trying to make this weird outlying character for the sake of being a dick, you might actually have a character that can be worked in if you work with people. If you work with the DM and the players.
Work with people?
Hey, I know it's a drastic.
What are you, a newbie?
No, I'm a hippie. Remember?
No, yeah, you're the Hippler. You're Anton Hippler. You're a new villain in my heroic game, Anton Hippler.
Anyways, but yeah, I it's one of those things that it's not a huge issue. I don't feel like it's really a giant talking point, but I think it is an important consideration when you're coming to a table, or when you're bringing people to your table, or even when you're picking a game. This is another. Know your game. Know your abilities. Again, I would not be the guy to run Twilight 2000 for a bunch of vets. Very likely really going to be lost in the weeds and getting a lot of glasses pushed up at me as I try to run them through this paramilitary situation. Meanwhile, they have actual experience. At the same time,
you ever hear that story about the guy who was at the Star Wars event, and he was there to run Star Wars RPGs as a part of the Star Wars event, and this old couple who were Star Wars fans from England wander over and ask what's going on, and he explains it to them, and they decide to sit in on the game, and it turns out the fucking dude's like an RAF master sergeant who had been in the war, and he takes these kids that are playing at the table, and he very quickly organizes them into an effective paramilitary force to go against the Empire and this whole thing. And they're basically and they're apparently totally into the game, totally having fun, and everybody's like, oh my god, yeah, and they're like totally listening to this old British campaigner as he's walking them through the whole thing. That's what you want from a military guy at a table. You want the military guy who goes, I know stuff, and I'm going to help you guys understand this world and be efficient by me being the person that commands you. I have very few people that I played with that are vets do actually, you know what I mean?
I've been lucky enough myself too to not have that experience, So yeah, I mean, I'm not trying to say vets are bad players. I'm just saying that.
Oh no, there are some bad players who are vets. Like the two are not mutually exclusive or inclusive, right?
I just know there's a hell of a lot of service folks who are gamers.
Yes.
Yeah. So I'm definitely not trying to distance myself from a huge section of the hobby. Go ahead, Sash.
I am. Screw this. I am.
I like it when I get engineers in my game. I like seeing,
of course,
when they get creative. There are just certain results that tickles me, because when they are presented with this world where their ideas that they know are questionable and wrong is suddenly permitted. There's a smile that just creeps in, not visibly all the time, but that their brain is going, wait, I'm allowed to do this now. And then the math starts coming in, and the system starts rolling, and the snowball comes at you. It's great, because that is often a thing. When I get one of them into the group, they are the ace for the team, because the engineer, the problem solver, will find a solution, and it's often a drastic one. But I can follow their reasoning, and it's fun.
Yeah.
Sorry to go a bit.
No, go ahead.
No, I was taking a bit off topic, but as long as we're
kind of out of the main topics and just kind of discussing more any little tidbits we can onto the topic. I think I guess one other point would be that and I touched on it earlier. You can have a game that has no voice of its own, and you can give it a voice, and I think that's always a positive. Whereas it doesn't work in reverse. I think having a game that has a strong voice and then peeling away that voice, at least if you don't replace it with another, is always to the detriment. Like we're gonna use the Star Wars D6 system, but rewrite it to be this other game. Like back before there was an official, there was an official Aliens game. There was the Leading Edge one, which is unplayable.
You think?
I took the D6 Star Wars system and I turned it into an Aliens game, and I ran a very successful, like 6 adventures, not 6 sessions, 6 adventures long Colonial Marine campaign. But that's because I replaced the voice of the game with another voice and just used the mechanics. If you're going to play Star Wars, again, going to go back to my big nitpick, and it is nothing Star Wars other than just the setting, then why are you playing Star Wars? You might as well be playing Traveler or whatever else, you know?
Because, well, I'm going to disagree with you on that one. Because in the expanded universe, we've seen there's more to Star Wars than Jedis and Rebels.
That's true. But in those cases, though, there's still a fair amount of Star Wars isms. So if you're playing an underworld campaign in Star Wars, you are then dealing with, Dark Sun, Black Sun, or the Hutts, or
no. The tropes need to be there. All I'm saying is you can play Star Wars without it being about Jedi or being about Rebels.
Absolutely agree with that. It's just, I guess my experience has been, yes, we've played in the setting, but the themes have been so watered down as to be pointless. For example,
I think the other problem, based on our conversation, to be honest, is that you played with people who just wanted to play fucking Firefly.
I would say that, except for it was all before Firefly existed.
No. I mean, ultimately, Firefly was the thing that they saw and went, "Oh my god, this is what we've wanted all along." But that's ultimately what they wanted to do, was just be fucking space trucking heisters or whatever.
Well, the other problem too is that everybody just wanted to play absolutely disjointed characters and just play whatever the character they wanted, and not try to have a focus for the game. You'd have a bounty hunter and a swoop racer and a Jedi and a dark Jedi and
this got interesting. So we have a Jedi and a dark Jedi on the same team. All right.
You just have this, and nobody was sitting there going, okay, so we're all together because of reasons, or we're all together because of happenstance, or even if they had the happenstantial connection, sort of like you have in Star Wars, where Han Solo, when he first meets up with the characters, is just the pilot they hired, right? But through the benefits of writing and a plot, he becomes more. And I think at a gaming table for playing Star Wars, continuing with the Star Wars example, if you don't make the concession to where, okay, if our characters don't have a connection to begin with, the GM should have in mind an inciting event that brings them together in a cause, whether that is skullduggery or
Doug Scullery
or Doug Scullery, yes, or Agent Scullery, but
No, you're right, and that's like, so I have to do this at 3:00 today. I'm running my first session of the Conan BRP game I'm running. And I forced all of them in characters to come up with reasons. And I said, you need to have some sort of mythos event, not a huge thing, just something mythos that is driving your character. Something happened that you need more information on. And it worked, giving them that play whatever the fuck you want, but here's the connection I need from you all so I can bring you all together in common purpose. So the Rebellion provides that in Star Wars easily, or just hatred of the Empire. Because I was a good Imperial citizen until the day someone in my village turned out to be a rebel and they nuked my whole village and put us all in slavery.
I do know that my very first character I ever made for the Star Wars RPG was a bounty hunter, and basically I decided to create the inverted Luke. So my character was also a kid from Tatooine. He actually knew Luke. He was in that group that did the swoop racing and stuff, and he was resentful of Luke. And so instead of going away to fight, to become a hero, he got in with the Hutts and became a bounty hunter. And so he was like the inverted Luke. That was a fun character to play.
Agent Doug Scullery performs surgery on your brain.
Although I have played some rather admittedly just dumb characters in Star Trek and Star Wars. I played a used spaceship dealer named Joe Benjabi. Uh, uh, and Punjabi spaceship dealer extraordinaire.
Oh no!
I sold the players their ship, and unfortunately, the Empire showed up, and I ended up going along with them. So, and then there was me playing the Twi'lek swoop racer, where I played the entire game with a pair of blue sweatpants on my head. So I had the Leku.
You're very happy about this.
That was fun. I'm sorry.
Good. No. That's good. Good. You had fun. That's all that matters.
Well, the thing is like I always played. I did play all of those characters to fit in. Like when I made Joe Benjabi, the whole point when I made the character, you got to admit it's a very Star Wars name, though. Stupid.
I'm gonna get a cup of coffee.
But I played that character with the intent of, and at the very beginning of the game, we all discussed this is where the group ship is going to come from. My character will have sold the ship to the players, and then the GM created a situation where the action brought us all together. And of course, my character's entire life had been ruined because he was now a fugitive, and so couldn't really go back to selling spaceships. And so I just played with it, and I think that's a big thing as a player in those situations. I really think that you have to be willing to give your characters reasons. It's the whole Bilbo has to leave the Shire concept.
Oh yeah,
you have to concede that you're there to play that game, and regardless of. And the whole why would my character go into that cave, or why would my character look into that spooky mystery, or why would my character take on this fight against the Empire? You have to make that decision. You have to figure out the reason why your character does that. That is your job as the player. Otherwise, you're not playing, and you really need to leave the table. It's not your DM's job to give you motivation. It's for you to find the motivation that fits your character. Now, the DM has some responsibility to provide a hook, but he's not psychic, and certainly he's not there to twist your arm to get you to play the game. So,
no, I agree. It's the players need to put in the work as well.
This was actually part of the play. Actually, it was kind of funny because while we were playing, the ship had problems, and so it was a lot of like me quoting Han Solo with "It's not my fault." It worked when I sold it to you. But
I am gonna have to call it.
That's fine.
On my side.
No, I appreciate you coming on. We're kind of in that ramble phase, anyways.
That was a lot of fun. Thank you for having me on.
Awesome. Have a good one, man.
And you.
All right, so Bear's off making coffee, leaving me here by myself. No, I've only got a few minutes before I gotta go, anyways. Before I gotta end the stream, but I think when it really comes down to it, if you're going to play it, if you are going to pick a game that has a voice, it is important that you pay attention to that. Otherwise, there was no point to pick that game in the first place. Now, if everybody at the table is down for abandoning the voice and you just kind of want to play freeform in that setting, then it's a moot point. It's not an argument that really you need to have because everybody's in agreement. And ultimately, that's the big important thing at the table. But don't be the player who comes to the game who doesn't want to play that. Don't be the GM who presents the game as such and then veers off into your own weird headcanon, unless, of course, that's part of the pitch. We're going to play Star Wars, but we're going to play Star Wars as if the Empire won. That's our campaign. They actually managed to get the Death Star around Yavin. They destroyed the Rebel base, and that's where we're picking up. The Death Star is still out there. They failed. That could be a fun campaign. That could be you're now the new rebel hero, so they have to pick up in the wake of that. That could be a game, but that needs to be spelled out up front. Don't just don't sell high fantasy and then deliver gritty low fantasy. Don't promise dark and spooky gritty fantasy and have it be generic fantasy land. You're just not doing anybody any favors doing that. And for God's sake, don't make the joke character.
Waka waka waka. I fucking hate joke characters, and nothing gets you on my don't play list faster than presenting me a joke character and trying to get me to take it seriously.
Yeah. And that is different than playing a character who part of his character is he has a sense of humor. If you're playing the character who is the wisecracker, that is a character. That's different. Yeah, that's different. When your character is literally a thumb in the nose to the campaign, that's when it's a problem. But also, I will say that flips around. You can have DMs that do that too, where they're like, ha, and I'm just going to shit on everybody's expectations of what this campaign is supposed to be.
Yeah.
And the whole campaign was just a giant joke character for the DM.
Yeah, that's nice. I would not play.
Was that?
I would not play that. I would fucking be like, are you fucking kidding me?
Oh, I mean, I would definitely walk away from that game real quick. But then again, the only game I've ever played where it was played for the sake of humor was Toon. I played Toon.
Hang on, Janet says, so you do not like bards? What makes you think I don't like bards?
Janet, I've never run into the stereotypical bard in the game. Never had the horny bard at my table, and I've had plenty of bard players at my table. I've had skalds, I've had orc throat singers, I've had everything else. I had one bard who was kind of funny in that, like, he didn't play an instrument. He was basically just like an a cappella bard, but at the same time, that's a thing. You can, lots of musicians in the Middle Ages didn't necessarily even have an instrument, but I've never had the horny bard. I've had.
No, they don't. Hang on, Janet. They don't all joke around and play music. I played a bard who was a poet, and he would read poetry instead of singing songs. And he didn't joke around. He was very grave and took things very seriously. Or I've seen people play bards who are actors. And what they do is they do everything through theatrics and by doing verse from plays. Doesn't mean they were joking around all the time. Stereotypes exist, but you don't have to play them.
Yeah, the bard character class isn't even based around that. It's based more around like the Celtic bard or the Norse skald type character, a knowledgeable character who is a master of poetry and can incite the emotions of others. Yes, they have instruments. They did work some of that medieval minstrel in there. But yeah, most of the people I've had played bards in my game.
So a joker is not a character. The joker is the person who comes into the game. And you say, okay, we're playing a very serious D&D game. And Eli goes, okay, I'm going to play an elf lordling who's in exile because he's far too fascinated with human culture. And his name is this. And he writes this whole thing. It's great. And then you, Janet, come in and you make your character. And she's a freed slave who was never going to be a courtesan. And she's taken up the sword because she's never going to let another man dominate and control her. And then IQ shows up and he goes, I'm playing a guy called Stab Skull Thrust. And Stab Skull Thrust likes to kill people, drink, and he eats gold. And you're just like, what the fuck, dude?
Yeah, I'm not saying don't play the jovial.
Yeah, the character can be jovial.
Yeah, you want to come in and play Shakespeare, literally that would be a character. And you can make your jokes and you can crack your jokes at the table. It's not the character's personality. It's not a joking character that's the problem. It is the character concept that is itself a joke.
A joke. Yeah, Janet has only played really with one group, and she hasn't played enough to understand. She hasn't run into the joke player yet.
You are in a blessed space.
Yes.
Wait till you sit down with the players, with a group of players, and there's that one player who just takes the wind out of the sails of the game.
Yeah. Hey, we're playing a superhero game, and this guy's made a Paragon, and this guy's made a Psionicis, and this guy's made a Speedster, and now Steve wants to play a guy who I control mollusks. I have the power of mollusk control, and I keep a tank of mollusks with me that I use, and I fuck off, Steve. Get the fuck out of my game, please. Like that, because they just want to be an attention whore. They just want to thumb their nose at everything. They just want to show how much cleverer they are than everybody, and they don't take it seriously. And as a result, for the players who are taking it seriously, this person is reducing their fun, and for the GM who's taking it seriously, this person is shitting on their work.
And just to be clear, joke characters are not always funny either. I think a good example, speaking again with superhero games, but also in this way, a lot of them, is the lone wolf, the edgelord kind of lone wolf character. That is itself, maybe joke character is the wrong term, the shtick character, or the character who is all, I mean, it's okay for a character to have a shtick, but if your character is the shtick, it is a problem. When you have that edgelord lone wolf who doesn't know how those characters actually work in film, literature, TV, comics, whatever, they're unbearable because they never want to be with the rest of the party and they never want to engage with the rest of the players. Seth Murkowski actually does a great video on the edgelord. And they miss the point, for example, because in superhero campaigns, it's like, I want to be Wolverine. And most of them miss the point of Wolverine.
Hence why they're pizza cutters. They're all edge, no point.
Exactly.
And that's the problem. It's literally the best way to put it for generic terminology is if you're playing a serious superhero campaign, everybody makes serious superheroes, and then one guy shows up playing a character that fits in Mystery Men or the Tick. It's just a joke character. The character doesn't take the world seriously. The player doesn't take the campaign seriously. They're just there to be a dick all night long and do their thing. Or alternately, they don't understand the character. They're the guy who says, I don't understand why Batman doesn't just shoot the Joker. Well, you don't understand Batman clearly if you're trying to figure out why he doesn't just shoot the Joker, right? Or why Superman doesn't just take over the world. So those types of players need to not play those games. They need to play in games that suit them, but they won't go play in games that suit them because they don't want to be around other people who are doing the same thing they're doing because it doesn't scratch or tickle their pickle the way being the jerk, I'm the fucking spoiler in a serious game really feeds that hole.
A serious player who's invested in the group can still make some of those characters work. Again, Wolverine works in the X-Men because if we were to take it as a player, that player has conceded that, yes, my character likes to be by himself, but deep down he actually kind of enjoys the camaraderie and finds some benefit in being around other people. It's, embracing that arc, that character growth, that a lone wolf character or a loner character provides to you. Another example would be, look at Toad. Right, look at the Brotherhood of Evil Mutants as a whole, right? You've got the Blob and Toad in there, who easily could have been somebody's joke character. We're gonna have this group of evil mutants, and we're gonna have a guy who does fire, and a guy who does earthquakes, and another guy, and a woman who can shapeshift and turn into whatever she needs to, and a giant unstoppable man mountain of a character. What are you going to play? I'm going to play a big fat guy. What are you going to play? I'm going to play a guy who hops around and looks like a frog. Those can easily be joke characters. And the difference would be whether the player is willing to sit down and work with the GM or actually put a little thought and time into his character. Yes, my character is a big fat guy, but his physical form is an aspect of his mutations. It makes him a formidable character, and then you're going to play him. Or Toad is a skeevy little dude who looks as bad as he actually is, like personality-wise. He's a little Toad.
Yeah. Okay, guys, stop referring to Golden Age Batman as the cornerstone for how Batman is. That's like referring to biplanes as the pinnacle of airplanes. Stop. That is like the comic nerd argument has gone on for 50 fucking years on this one. Can we please accept we're talking about modern Batman?
I will put this forward about Batman, too. Had he continued on the trajectory that he did when he initially was put out, he would have disappeared.
Yep.
It was only when they added the depth of character to him that made him different from the Shadow, from the Phantom, from all of those other characters. That
there's an argument to be made that when they added Robin, that's when Batman became Batman. Was the minute they added Robin to the equation.
Well, yeah, I mean, I think it's a matter of steps. It's it's like when he ditched the guns, that gave him a little bit of depth. When he got the Joker as a villain and actually got an arch nemesis instead of the villain of the week, that was interesting.
Just hit it on the head. Spider-Man is not a joke character. Deadpool is not a joke character. They are characters who make jokes, but they're actually characters. For all of Deadpool's joking around and stuff, pay attention to the types of jokes he makes. There is a reverence to the source material. There is a respect to the source material. And that is very different than just making jokes. You want the best example for superheroes? Compare Mystery Men and the Tick to the Boys. Mystery Men and the Tick make tons of jokes. They play jokes about incompetent superheroes, the whole 9 yards. But there's always one foot in the we love superheroes camp, and that's why we're doing this. The Boys, Garth Ennis hates fucking superheroes. So they're all incompetent. They're all morally bankrupt. They're all murderous. They're all stupid, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. That man hates superheroes. So there's a big difference between the two. You can play a comical character in a serious situation. That's not what we're talking about. We're not talking about comical characters. We're not talking about characters who are quippers or jokers. We're talking about characters that are designed to literally shit on the voice genre that you're playing because the person doesn't like it or he just treats it as absurdism. That's a difference. And if you don't see the difference, you might be the problem.
Yeah, I think it's fair to say that plenty of good, solid, even serious subject matter has that character who is funny. Han Solo is kind of the comic relief in Star Wars, right? He's by far the funniest of the characters. Matthew Broderick's character in Lady Hawk. It's a very serious kind of fantasy story, right? With some with some feels. And here's Matthew Broderick's character who is cracking jokes, but he's still got heart and he still fits into the setting. There's it's
and he talks to God.
Exactly. I think it's definitely clearly there's a misunderstanding. Nobody's saying don't have a character who has funny traits. Inigo Montoya, funny.
Yeah.
Right? Fezzik,
but
funny.
When the time comes, serious.
Yeah, I think a good, funny character is a character who's still grounded in his humor. Or ultimately he's still a character. There's more to him than his jokes. And that's where the joke character really becomes a problem. Like you mentioned with Deadpool or even people with Spider-Man. Spider-Man's got a lot of other stuff going on besides his quips. His quips honestly are a coping mechanism for dealing with the weight of the world on him when he's out there fighting. Because Spider-Man has a gigantic imposter syndrome when he's out there fighting guys like the Hulk, or Juggernaut, or even everybody else.
Spider-Man is a bully. Go back and read your Spider-Man comics. Go watch your Spider-Man cartoons. Go watch your Spider-Man movies where they quip him, where they have him quipping. His quips are all a nerd getting his revenge because he attacks the visuals of the villains he's fighting. He makes fun of their intelligence. He bullies them into making mistakes so that he can capitalize on them. He doesn't realize he's being a bully, but he is. And that's what makes him a fascinating fucking character, is that here's this guy who's trying to do good, but ultimately he's just a bully. At the end of the day, he's just a bully on the right side of the moral compass. There's a classic bit where he winds up in court against J. Jonah Jameson as Spider-Man. They bring him in to testify, and they ask him this question. They say, why do you think it is that he wrote all these articles about you negatively? And he says, oh, I always thought it was because I was black. And everybody in the court's like, oh, and Jameson's like, I never said, no, I'm kidding, I'm not black. That's a bully moment. That's a shitty fucking moment, but that's our hero. He is a broken, damaged person, which is why when Stan Lee and those guys were writing those books in the 60s and early 70s, people were able to relate to them because they could see themselves in these characters. That's what Marvel's strength always was.
He's got insecurities. He's got, he's not full of himself, like a lot of superhero characters are, despite the fact that he's a remarkably effective and pretty powerful in his simplicity character. Spider-Man is pretty tough. He's never like, hey, look at me, I'm Spider-Man. It's like, you almost and I think that's important when you're creating these characters. When you're creating a character who could be venturing into the joke, if you're serious, and it's kind of a non-argument because neither Bear or myself are saying that people who want to have funny characters is the problem. It's the people whose character concept is in of itself a joke. Where you're basically taking a piss on the campaign, on the game. You want to play a Hudson in the Aliens game? Cool. Play a Hudson. Just understand that when it comes down to it, Hudson was still, before he freaked out, a pretty solid soldier.
Glenn, come join us on Eli's channel if you want to talk. And it wasn't my theory. I've seen more than a few people present.
Yeah, except we're going to be out of here in 15 minutes. So,
well, Glenn can come join in the chat in 15 minutes over here. But Len, it's not my take. It's a take other people have made. I've watched their take make the take, and they present enough evidence that it's a factual take. So while Spider-Man may be your little precious boy, Len, he's a fucking bully. And and it makes sense that he's a bully because he was bullied. And in the psychology of humanity, bullied people who gain power tend to become bullies.
I was a bully in junior high because I was insecure and I had been picked on and bullied.
Come on, Len, fight me.
It's funny because one of the biggest problems I've had with the whole anti-bullying campaign that has been going on for the last, decade or two is very rarely do they ever speak to the root causes of bullies. And I was amazed when I watched one of those like family movies that was about bullying that actually focused on what made a bully. Like they spent time showing that this kid's home life was shit. And, he was a bully because reasons, not just because he's randomly mean. So, I mean, Spider-Man, you're right. Peter Parker was everybody's punching bag. So sure, when he finally can lift a Mack truck, he's going to be...
What is the first thing he does when he gets powers?
He goes and gets into the wrestling ring. And
People
also
then
rough up a couple of crooks, too.
Well, yeah, but he goes and becomes a fucking dick.
Yeah.
He becomes a narcissistic dick real fast, and it's all about his ego. And then what happens? When his ego gets in the way, his uncle gets killed.
Yeah.
Now, that doesn't immediately make him a nice person. It just means he understands that he has a responsibility. But if you look at the way he torments his enemies, he's a fucking bully. He's just a bully on the right side of the angels. And by the way, Len, now we'll fight later. What's the matter, Colonel? Chicken?
Yeah,
there's an example of joke character. We're playing Star Wars, and you show up with a Spaceballs character.
There you go. Yeah, I think, if it really just needed to sum it up, if you pick a game that has a strong voice, you kind of have a responsibility to that, both as a GM and as a player. If you're not familiar with it and you want to play in it, make sure that you spend a little time figuring out what the voice of that game or that IP is. Especially voice games often really come along with IPs, but not exclusively. Call of Cthulhu is a good example. But also, I guess, just like any other game, this is not unique to the whole voice argument, but like any other game, especially as a player, if be self-aware enough to go to where if the game just isn't, if you can't click with the game or the concept or the voice of the game, don't play. Just make a mature decision to walk away.
Yeah, if your only goal to playing the game is to get all the attention on you and show what a badass cool guy you are and how fucking clever you are, maybe team sports isn't a choice for you.
Yeah, and I'm not saying don't be new and unsure of yourself in a game. and so thus don't play. That's not what I'm saying. If you are new and unsure of yourself and you want to play a game that maybe you don't fully understand, talk to people who do know it. Talk to the people you're going to be playing with. Make sure you're open to taking feedback and responses. Like you're playing Star Wars and you know nothing about Star Wars, and you're at the table and somebody's like, hey, that's not a thing in Star Wars. Don't get all uptight and upset because that's what you wanted your character to do. Be like, oh, okay, cool. I didn't realize that. I don't know Star Wars. Maybe even ask a follow-up question. How would that go in Star Wars? What's the Star Wars way to do this? See, if you're playing Star Trek, and you have an idea for what your character might want to do, but it doesn't necessarily click with Star Trek, or you don't know how they would do it in Star Trek, you're like, what's the Star Trek way of doing this? I mean, it's a legit question if you're new. If you somehow don't know Star Trek, and you just like, how would they handle this in this situation? Not asking for the solution from the GM, ask the other players, like, my character is this. What's the way? I'm not here to talk new people out of trying new things. We all get into that. Just be open to what it is that you're getting into and embrace that and enjoy yourself. Don't be disruptive and don't detract from other people's experiences for the sake of your own personal enjoyment, because then you're just being a douche. So
if you think superheroes should kill and that doesn't make them criminals, you are missing the point of the superhero and you're missing the point of the law. The whole point of the superhero is not to break the law and be judge, jury, and executioner. Hence, many times over the years, we've had the comic books that take the time to have the characters say, if I just kill the people that are breaking the law, at some point in time, I will become the criminal because I'll feel I have the power to just kill anyone who breaks the law. The Punisher is that extreme, right? So for people who are into that sort of thing in superheroes, I highly recommend you be into Deadpool and the Punisher and Spawn and all that fun stuff. But if you're into the heroic aspect of it, then your characters don't kill on purpose because they believe in bringing criminals to justice, not inflicting final justice.
Yeah, I mean, their comic books come with a certain level of ideology built into them. And you don't have to accept that. That just means that you're not playing in that era of comics. You're playing in these Iron Age era of comics, what you call it, post Bronze Age.
Soldiers and all that, that's a whole other genre, dude. That's a whole other thing. I'm talking about for superheroes, because that was the argument I was making, was the people were saying, why doesn't Batman just kill the Joker? Well, because Batman chooses not to be an executioner. Batman chooses to try and bring the Joker to law and let law work. And if law is broken, then he wants someone like Harvey Dent to be in the position to make the law work better and properly, except Harvey gets corrupted because Gotham is the shittiest place on earth. Bring your kids. They might turn into criminals to fight Batman later. But the point is that in any other type of game, that's your game. But there needs to be consequences for characters that just run around murdering. I'm reading Conan. I'm reading all the old Kurt Busiek, Carrie Nord, Dark Horse Conans right now. And every time Conan goes on a murder spree and kills a bunch of fucking city guardsmen, he's pretty much booking it out of town with a posse on his ass every time.
There's one whole Conan story that starts with him in jail for getting in a fight in a bar and killing somebody. Yeah, and again, it's not don't play those games. Just understand what game you're playing in, and that's the voice of the game. If the voice of the game is we're heroes, your killer is out of place. If the voice of the game is we are avenging dark knights of the street sweepers in costumes, then your killer is at home. Or if you're playing Twilight 2000, yes, killing people is essential because it's the apocalypse. It's at the same time, you could make a case for we only kill when we have to because bullets are rare. So
So it's knives all around.
Exactly. I mean, it's just for the Federation, for example, in Star Trek. I'm sure, yes, the Federation kills people every time they destroy a spaceship. People die, but the difference is that a good Federation commander generally tries to not do that first.
Mm.
Very few. If you're playing Star Trek, and you as the captain character, your response to the first time a Klingon is on your screen is to fire photon torpedoes, you've missed the voice of the game.
Yeah.
Because then you're that captain that Kirk is coming to find in episode number whatever. Because you're the captain who's renegading his way around the fucking neutral zone, attacking Klingon D7s on sight. Because and that you're a plot point at that point.
Mm.
Well, yes, per Nigel and TMNT.
Yeah, well, they killed people in the comics before we got sanitized into the child-friendly version of TMNT, but that's a whole other beast.
At least the dark version of TMNT still exists. There's like 2 parallel universes of TMNT now. So,
if your Ninja Turtles have color-coded headbands, you're not in the dark universe.
Some of the comics that have been written with that still are dark, though.
Oh yeah,
yeah.
I'll take your word for it.
Yeah. But it all comes. It all depends on who's doing it. So I guess the point is that there's enough kids who grew up knowing those as their turtles to now they're adults with adult sensibilities to where there have been comics written with more adult turtles who have the colored bandanas, because it is really handy to be able to identify them besides looking for their weapons, especially when you start having them use a wider variety of the ninja tools. Oh. And so Michelangelo isn't wielding his nunchucks. Which turtle is he?
Color code them. No, but and this goes back to the Batman point. Characters and story types evolve over the decades, and the new ones replace the old ones as the trope.
That is
just the way it is.
Action of time and art.
Yeah.
Even Star Trek evolves over time, and even if we ignore the most modern iterations, Next Generation in its long span, then into DS9 and then into Voyager, there was a lot of evolution and innovation that changed in Star Trek. We saw
Star Trek. Watch the viewer count drop. It's so weird. So we're talking about Star Trek. Watch the viewer count drop.
We've been talking about a lot of things. So those people who are ditching because we started talking Star Trek, we were just talking superheroes and turtles and Star Wars and
Batman. You all love Batman.
I mean, yeah.
Actually, my favorite line ever was from the New 52 when Green Lantern meets Batman. He's like, "So you fly? No, but you're Batman. Bats fly." It's like, just why don't you fly?
Yeah. All right. Well, I am going to have to call it quits and go grab some breakfast and get ready for the other stuff I got to do today. Again, thank you to Bear, who is still here, and Saxius for coming on, who is not here anymore. We didn't do a what have you been doing in gaming, because I have not had a lot of gaming, just because all of my games are kind of on hold while my real life is in the way. But Bear, you have games coming up.
I have a game coming up at 3:00, which is going to be the first session of our Savage Swords versus the Outer Dark.
Cool.
Yeah.
That is your Conan versus Cthulhu, basically, right?
Essentially, yeah.
Yeah, if we had to elevate
watch as I make you groan as I get everything wrong for Conan, then I get everything wrong for Cthulhu. Come enjoy the fun.
There is no wrong in those two. Yeah.
You'd be surprised what people will say.
People themselves. All right. Well, with that, I'm going to go ahead and call it quits for today. Thanks to everybody who tuned in. There was a crap ton of you, and I appreciate the comments, even though I don't get a chance to respond to most of them. If you have other comments, there is a comment section that will appear under the video after it's posted and done. If you're not subscribed, already subscribe. I don't usually pimp myself because I'm not trying to grow subscribers. But hey, if you like this, it happens weekly. And I have an every other week game of OSE, which is BX for the folks who don't know what OSE is, where we play a sword and sorcery Conan-esque type world. Also, we did it first before Bear did.
Yeah, nice fucking art you have for your thing, eh?
Well, yes, Bear did help with that a little bit.
Bear was supposed to play in the game but couldn't in the end.
No, it's all good. But that is also currently, it has missed a couple of sessions because of real life, but it is still a living campaign. And we have another player coming in soon because James is joining. And so we'll see how that goes. And with that, everybody get out and game. Have a good one. Bear already did his peace-loving geek. So, and I'm out.